I'm James Helder. Welcome to Full Court Football 24. Quite privileged to be joined by former Manchester United, Royal Antwerp, Reading, Burnley, West Ham United, Stoke City, Norwich City, Milton Keynes, Cambridge United star Luke Chadwick. How are we, Luke?
Yeah, all good, James. Long old list you got there. I didn't realise I played for that many teams.
I've got to say, yeah, a lot of teams in there. When I was doing my research, I didn't realise you'd quite played for quite that many teams either. Good career, mate. Very good career.
Yeah, I think a fair few of them were loan moves, but it's nice to have seen a fair bit of the country, that's for sure.
I bet. I'd like to talk about your early footballing career today to begin with. I know you're from the Cambridge area, so could you give us a little insight into your upbringing and your family dynamic?
Yeah, so in terms of football, my first memories of playing football would have been in my back garden, probably as a 4, 5, 6-year-old lad with my older brother who's a couple of years older, and my dad. We lived in a little council house in a tiny village called Meldreth, but it had a massive garden, so we spent a lot of the time out there. So it was that's where our first experience kicking the ball about. And then probably at the age of 6, my old man took me to my first ever live game of football, which was at the Abbey Stadium to watch Cambridge United, and that experience really blew me away. Just being at a live football game, being so close to the players, experiencing the atmosphere, and I come away from there thinking, like I said, just blown away from it and just couldn't wait to go back. I think that was the biggest memory I've got of football as a young child growing up.
How did you initially start playing the game then? How did that spark start for yourself as a young sort of sprightly lad? Yeah,
so back years ago when I was a little, and it was you didn't start playing organised football till under 9, so I would have just played in the school playground at primary school, and then a lot of the time in the garden at home. And then as an 8-year-old, I was signed for my first team. That would have been Melbourne Tigers under 9. So it was back in them days as well. It was straight onto a full-size pitch with full-size goals. I think it was like 20 minutes each way, and I was absolutely buzzing, of course, to be part of a team. So that was the first club I played for.
How long would you have played for that team then before you started getting recognised, whether that be for the district team or for local sides? How did that come to fruition for you?
Yes, I would have played for Melbourne Tigers, for Melbourne, until probably the age of under 13 is when I would have left there. During that time, I would have played for like the league representative team, where the gifted players from each of the teams would come together to make that team, and you play against other teams from other leagues, from around the area. It was around under 13. I signed for the School of Excellence at Arsenal and played a season there. That was off the back of playing for a team called East Anglia Boys, which was a representative team from kids around East Anglia, and we used to go away on tours to. We went to Denmark a couple of times. We went to America once, went to Holland. So it was incredible experiences, and they sort of had a link with Arsenal. And it was off the back of that I'd signed for Arsenal as an under 13 player, the same sort of time that I'd start playing for the Cambridge Schools team on a Saturday. So I'd play Cambridge Schools Saturday, Arsenal Sunday, and train once a week at Highbury. There was a little indoor area behind one of the stands. So I'd train there once a week as well. So that was where I was getting me football at them sort of ages.
How much of a big deal was it for you then to be going to Arsenal, to be going to Highbury once a week and representing them on a Sunday?
It was a big deal in terms of I could show off about it to my mates at school and talk about it a lot. In all honesty, I didn't really enjoy it that much. Arsenal was a fantastic football club, but I was a real quiet, shy boy who was more comfortable in my own surroundings, just playing with my mates, and I found it a bit of a hassle. It was like an hour and 20 minutes from my house to get to training, whether that be on the train or getting driven there. So it was always there's a fair few times when I'd make up a little upset stomach on a Wednesday evening, so I didn't have to go and train in the game in the training sessions. I always loved playing games, no matter who that was for. But I found the training a bit of a a bit of a bind sometimes. But it was obviously an honour to represent such a wonderful football club.
After that year, what happened then? Did you have a chance to stay with Arsenal and to continue your football development, or was it a case of seeing what else was out there?
That's when it all probably started getting a little bit more serious. Obviously, I'd done quite well at Arsenal, but I'd done really well playing for the Cambridge schools team on a Saturday where I was scoring loads of goals, really, week in, week out, and I'm forging a bit of a reputation. And it was off the back of that I got scouted by Manchester United and was invited up over the school holidays for a week up at United, where I'd train with other lads that were up on trial, and then the week would end with a game, and they'd make a decision whether they wanted to sign me. So I went up there, again, quite nervous, again, being quite worried about mixing with other kids and that sort of thing. But back then, United was sort of the dream ticket in terms of they were far and away the best club in the country back then, particularly with the young players. It was just the period where the likes of Beckham, the Nevilles, but the class of 92 were sort of cementing their place in the team, and it was the place to be for young players coming through. So I went up there, obviously excited, but a bit worried and nervous at the same time. But the second that I got up to United, it was incredible. Like, I've never felt so wanted. I've never been in an environment quite like it. You just felt you was part of something special. And within a day, 2 days of being there, I just was hoping and praying that I'd do enough to get signed by the club. And I've done well over that week. And I got the train back to the little village where I live. And my mum picked me up from the train station. As soon as I got in the car, she told me that Sir Alex Ferguson had been on the phone to her. He was at the game to ask if I'd signed schoolboy forms for the club. So as soon as I heard that, I was obviously delighted, and that was the club I wanted to sign for. Arsenal weren't happy at the time, and I remember later on that week I'd given the news that I was going to sign for Man United, and they were trying to keep me, and Bruce Rioch and Terry Murphy, the youth development officer at the time, come to my house in Meldreth where I lived, and that was quite a daunting experience to and they offered to sign me on a schoolboy form, 2-year apprenticeship and 1-year professional contract. And despite the fact that all that Manchester United offered me or guaranteed me was a 2-year schoolboy contract, I went with United purely for the way that I felt up there. I generally felt like I was in something special, like some sort of football Disneyland. It was just so incredible, so tight-knit. You was at the cliff and you were like so close to the likes of Cantona, Steve Bruce. It was such a family feel to it that I took the chance and signed for Manchester United.
What did Bruce Rioch say when you told him that you weren't going to be signing for Arsenal? What was his reaction to that?
I'm pretty sure me and my mum were in the house at the time, and we sort of left it saying, "Oh, he'll have a good think about it." Then I think I made my mum phone up Terry Murphy, the youth development officer, and let her deliver the news that I weren't going to sign. I don't think I had the bottle to tell Bruce Rioch myself that I weren't going to be signing.
Incredible. So you decided to take that 2-year youth contract with Manchester United. What was your first impressions going back there as a youth player?
It was just like I couldn't wait. What I'd do, because I obviously was getting schooled in Cambridge, I'd go to school Monday to Friday, but I'd finish school on Friday morning after the first lesson. Then I'd go straight to the train station and get the train up to Manchester and spend the weekend at Manchester. I'd be on the bench for the A or the B team on the Saturday, and then I'd play for my age group team on the Sunday and then travel home. Then every school holiday, I'd go up to Manchester and stay there. And I just loved it. I couldn't wait for school holidays. So I'd be up playing football with people that I'd built friendships with coaches that were always seemed generally so pleased to see you. It was an incredible time of my life, football-wise. I definitely think it certainly affected my education in a negative way, in terms of I lived in a little village. I thought I was sort of the bee's knees signing for Manchester United. Everyone suddenly knew who I was, and I was sort of living the dream. I downed tools at school to a certain extent and was just certainly putting all my eggs in one basket of eventually becoming a professional footballer.
What's your earliest memory or conversation you would have had with Alex Ferguson? What's your first initial memory when Alex Ferguson is mentioned?
So my first memory, still got pictures of it. When you sign as a schoolboy for Manchester United, they invite your whole family up. So I went up with my mum, stepdad, my dad, stepmum, my brother, and we went to the first team game again. I remember it well. It was against Bolton, and before the game we went up to Sir Alex's office. We had all pictures of signing the contract with a shirt and Man United tie and all that on. And then after the game, I went down with Dave Bushell, the youth development officer, actually into the dressing room with the first team players. They'd just won, I think it was 4-0. I remember it well because Terry Cook made his debut for United that day, and he was absolutely brilliant on the right wing. And I just remember just being in the dressing room, quite awkward and nervous around all these big stars, but thinking it's just a way that everything that was done at the club was done with so much sort of class, and they looked after you so well that it was an incredible day for me and my family. And I remember it well because my mum was a massive. We went down to the cliff as well. I think they were having their pre-match meal there, and my mum met Eric Cantona, who she absolutely was adored, was always her favourite. So she got to meet Cantona as well. But like the way you were treated was incredible.
How were the coaches there? Obviously, Eric Harrison and the class of '92, they've had that legendary bond. Were there any coaches from your age group that really made a big impact on yourself?
Yeah, I think all the difference with Man United probably to other professional clubs that I've been around is like everyone there, whether it be a player, coach, member, physio, anyone, they seem to genuinely love the fact that they were there, the enthusiasm they had, and it sort of came off on you or brushed off on you, and it used to just make you want to be there so much as well. I remember my under-16s manager was Warren Joyce, who was but he was still a professional player at the time as well. I think he was playing for Hull City, and I remember thinking, wow, this is a professional footballer actually being my coach as well. I remember Paul McGuinness was brilliant. We used to get free football boots, Umbro football boots, and you'd go to see Paul and he'd go up to the cupboard and get you. And then when I went up full-time, that was when, as an apprentice, as a 16-year-old after I left school, that's when Eric was in charge, and he was sort of the youth team manager. He was under his jurisdiction then.
Talk to me about making that step up in signing professional terms with Manchester United, going up to from the under-16s, progressing.
Yeah, so I got the news probably about 3 months before we were due to move up that I'd been accepted and been offered a scholarship at the club. And I remember, again, it was obviously a big step leaving home. I remember we had our school prom at Melbourne Village College, and we went to that one night, and then the very next morning at 6 o'clock, my dad was driving me up to start my new life in Manchester. So it was quite a big step. I was living in digs on Littleton Road, which is just up the road from the cliff, like a little terraced house, like something out of Coronation Street. Couldn't be further away from the sort of village life that I was living in Meldriff, where the most exciting thing to happen there every year is the church gate, probably. So it was a different world I was moving into, and it was something that I was really, really nervous about. And I really probably struggled for the first 2-3 weeks. I was on the phone quite a lot to my mum in tears, just wanting to come home because I was so homesick and sort of missing her and the life that I was used to. But once I got used to it, that like them 2 years as a scholar, I'm sure most players say it is an incredible time where you left school, you're starting to feel a bit more like an adult, and better than anything else, you're doing something you love doing every day. There's no more maths class where you sat at the back not listening. Now you're just in football class every day. So it was a wonderful experience.
Would you have been in digs initially when you went up there? When you're staying in the little Coronation Street house, would that have been a accommodation for other players as well?
Yeah, so all the out of town boys that signed Scholar would all be in different digs scattered about Salford, so they were all quite close to each other. But ours was there was me and another lad called Jason Hickson. He was from Hull, and we stayed in digs with a guy called John Lancaster, who was an incredible fella. He was actually Phil Bardsley's granddad, and Phil Bardsley lived just down the road. His dad used to run the working man's club just up the road by the training ground at Littleton Road. So it was, like I say, the whole club felt like a real family, really.
We've heard stories in the past of people like Ryan Giggs and Lee Sharp, who at that age would have been going out and quite promiscuous on the nightlife scene. I'm guessing that wouldn't have been a bit of you at that time.
No, not really. I remember we used to knock about sometimes out on the streets, like talking to the other kids around it. But I was, like I say, quite quiet. I'd be more than happy just to stay in my room, and I was really focused and concentrating on my football. I was one of the lads that would shoot home every weekend. I'd get like a 4-hour train home just to spend the night at home, then come back on the Sunday. But I weren't a big one in terms of going out. A few of the lads did, but I weren't into it all that much. I remember once, I think it was my 17th birthday, and I went out some nightclub here or there, but I had way too much to drink. And I remember just throwing up in the toilet, and I thought maybe this ain't the sort of life for me. So I weren't a big drinker back then, but it was obviously an incredible city to live in, Manchester.
What was the quality of coaching from Eric Harrison when you made that step up? Bearing in mind the success that he's had with the previous years of players, the class of 92, for instance, what was the coaching caliber like for you at that time?
Yeah, the coaching was obviously world class. He was at a world class football club. I'd say the biggest lessons and the biggest demands were along the lines of what was expected in terms of your attitude as a Manchester United player, of the hard work that it requires, the keeping your feet on the ground, the being humble. It was real life lessons that are drummed into you from a real young age at the football club of what's expected. Probably my lasting memory of Eric's coaching was the importance of forever checking your shoulders. We'd always spend hours upon hours just doing quite simple passing drills, but it was all around scanning and knowing what was behind you. If you look, I mean, the best at it was Paul Scholes. He was the king of scanning and knowing what's all around, and just constantly, like, his head could spin all the way around. So that was probably the real memory of detail that we'd done. Was there was so much around whatever position you play. It was so important of having that awareness of where you are on the pitch, whether you're in possession, out of possession, when you're receiving the ball, can you turn and play forward? Because that's what the club really wanted to do, play fast, attacking football and play the ball forward where possible.
Every player in that team had a common goal for Manchester United to be successful. Alex Ferguson's man management, I'm guessing, would have been slightly different for every player. I've heard stories of Eric Cantona, for instance, being maybe allowed to get away with certain things that other players wouldn't have had. Have you had any experience of the manager's first-hand man management yourself, or anything that you've seen and spotted?
I think, like, Sir Alex Ferguson's probably the most incredible person I've ever met. His attention to detail, and I think the biggest thing about his genius was his ability to build relationships where you'd want to go the extra mile for him, do more than you actually thought you could for him. Whether it was the kit men, the dinner ladies, every single person at the club, the gaffer knew. The gaffer would treat them as well as he possibly could, because he knew if he got the whole club pulling in the same direction, that's when football clubs are at their most successful. And what he achieved at the club was incredible. Like I mentioned, he phoned my mum up as a 14-year-old boy to ask me to sign. It weren't just me he'd do that for. He'd do that for all the lads he'd want to sign. I was at the club as a first-team player at Carrington, and there'd be under 10 under 11 academy boys there. He'd know every single one of their names. He'd know where every single one of them was from. He'd know what their parents were called. He'd make everyone feel so special and so important, no matter what role you played at the club, that everyone wanted to do everything they could for him. I think people always say about, did you ever get the hairdryer treatment from the manager? And I think everyone probably experienced it one time. And obviously that is real scary because he's a fearsome man. But worse than that, it was a feeling of letting the manager down. There weren't any worse feeling in the world than feeling that you thought you'd let him down, because he was the one person you wanted to impress. There was nothing better than the manager saying well done or praising you. That was the goal of more or less everyone at the club, is because he brought the whole football club together to turn it into the incredible force that it was.
Some of the hairdryer moments have become legendary over time. The instance with the boot and David Beckham. What was your hairdryer moment?
I think there was two I had. There weren't that much involving football either. There was one time where we had our Christmas party on a Tuesday night, but there was a reserve team game on the Thursday that I was told I was playing in, and we were told not to go out. I did go out, but I was driving. I just dropped the lads off somewhere, but just my luck, it all kicked off that night, and it ended up with some fighting, and we went into the Carrington the next day, and I just, unfortunately, wrong time, wrong place, was walking past the manager, and he shouted at me, "You were out when I told you not to be." And he shouted, "That's you fined 2 weeks' wages." And you could see that he was fuming. But coincidentally, that day was also the Christmas dinner at Carrington, where they do it every year, where the staff would serve the players their dinner. And the Sir Alex had a bowl of soup in his hand, and he saw me, and he slammed the bowl of soup down in front of me and said, "That's the most expensive bowl of soup you'll ever have." So he made light of the situation. There was another time as well where my time at the club was coming to an end, and I was set to go on loan. The manager was really keen for me to go to Cardiff, because obviously he was mates with Lenny Lawrence at the time. But I had my heart set on going to Reading with Alan Pardew, because although it weren't that close to my home in Cambridge, my missus was pregnant at the time, and I thought Reading to Cambridge was a lot easier than Cardiff. But he was, I told him that I was going to Reading, and he gave me a few choice words then as well. But like I say, it was a horrible feeling that you'd let him down, and as well as a scary one when he was having a pop at you as well.
I'd like to talk about making your professional debut for Manchester United and being involved in the first team squad at such a young age, which, again, you must have been doing something right. It's testament to how hard you've worked to get into Sir Alex's plans. Can you talk to me about that period?
Yeah, so I made my first team debut as a 17-year-old in the Worthington Cup, the League Cup. The manager used to play a lot of young lads at the time, and I think we all thought we might have half a chance. And there was probably 4 or 5 of us got told to train with the first team that day. So I remember, I think it was Steve McLaren told us that we'd be starting. I think it was me, Richie Wellings, Dave Healy, John Greening. We're all going to start the game, and it was at Aston Villa away. And I remember walking back to me digs from the Cliff to Littleton Road thinking, oh my God, it's actually going to happen. I never thought it was going to happen to actually pull on the shirt and play for Man United. It was happening so quickly. And I remember all my friends and family come up to Villa Park to watch, and we got beat, I think it was 3-0 on the night. I remember being so starstruck as well, because Dion Dublin was playing for Aston Villa, and he was a massive hero of mine growing up, being a Cambridge United fan. And it was like sort of being in a dream, being on the same pitch as him. I remember after the game, Sir Alex saying didn't really have a go at us, but told the group that don't think that it's acceptable coming to Aston Villa despite being a weakened team and getting beat 3-0. But at the same time, inside, I was just, despite the result, I was absolutely buzzing for the fact that I just played a game for Man United and couldn't hardly believe that it had happened.
What are the other players like at Manchester United when younger players are coming through? bearing in mind the nucleus of that squad had been homegrown, had come through the Manchester United Youth Academy, did they put more of an arm around the younger players in that situation?
Yeah, I think like the whole squad was brilliant. That like after that original debut, I didn't play again for the first team for a long time. Ended up going on loan to Royal Antwerp, and then when I came back from there, I was in the squad and training with the first team squad every day. And I do think the club loves, like from the history of it, it loves young players, homegrown players coming through. So it always, particularly with Sir Alex Ferguson, he wants to give all them players as good as opportunity as possible if they show that they can do it, to stay in there. I remember my first training session when I come back, and obviously it was completely different to Antwerp in terms of the speed of the play, how competitive it was. And I remember giving an easy pass away or something and being on the same team as Roy Keane, and he just like had a massive go at me, and it really sort of put me in my place. And I was thinking, oh my God, this is different to what I'm used to now. But that was sort of a big lesson in terms of what was expected, in terms of all the lads would welcome you with open arms and want you to do well. But if your standards weren't right on the pitch, you'd certainly be told about it, because that's what's required in the elite environment that it was there.
Watching Roy Keane as a fan, he seems to have such an aura about him when he played, such a high standard and benchmark that he set for himself and the rest of the team. Did you see anyone fell foul of Roy Keane's standards, and how would he sort of handle something like that?
I think at one time and another, I would imagine everyone in that squad would have felt the brunt of Roy's anger in terms of the standards not being right. He was able to do that. I think if you're someone that just has a go at people, but your standards aren't right all the time, it sort of falls on deaf ears. But Roy Keane's standards were high all the time, day in, day out. And he was a real leader, the ultimate captain, really, in terms of making sure every day was a battle. Every day in training was intense. It was physically, mentally, it was really, really tough. And that was because he was driving the standards, along with obviously loads of other world-class players. And it was all, I remember sort of joking at times with other young lads. We used to go into a little game at the end of every training session, sort of saying to him, oh God, I hope I'm not on Keane's team today. Because if he was on his team, you knew you had to be on it, and you know you had to win that game or you're in for a hard time. Having said that, off the pitch, he was an incredible man who really would go above and beyond to look after his team. There was times where he'd go out his way just to pick me up for training because I couldn't drive at the time and couldn't get there. There'd be times where he'd help young players out with contracts. He'd really go above and beyond as his role of the leader of the dressing room in terms of the playing side of things.
I think that's a brilliant point. I've never heard anyone speak about Roy Keane in that manner. The fact that he, like you said, went out of his way to pick you up, to help young players with their contracts. That's a side that we haven't really seen much of him in the public eye.
No, and I think like he probably won't thank people for saying it. Obviously, he's got his persona of a real hard man, which he was. But for me, he helped me in incredible amounts as a young player, both on and off the pitch.
What was it like then, the first loan spell to Royal Antwerp in Belgium? Bearing in mind, Carrington's probably the furthest you've been away from Cambridge. How did you handle that move on your own and that everything that goes along with moving to a new country?
Yeah, it was an incredible experience. I sort of had a real good 2 years as a scholar, performed really well, and probably was sort of spoke about of going back as my first year as a professional player, of going into the first team squad. I probably let that go to my head a little bit. And in that summer, after my second year, didn't do the work required away from the club, probably enjoyed myself a little bit too much. And when I went back in as a first year professional, I was a million miles away. I didn't perform well enough, and it was decided that I'd go off on loan to Royal Antwerp and sort of get my first regular experience of first team football. And I remember them flying me over there to watch a game before I went, and it blew my mind. The atmosphere was electric in the stadium. There was smoke bombs going off. It was a real, and I just couldn't wait to get out there and be part of it. Also, two of my mates from the youth team were already out there. They'd been out there for the season, so I had that sort of the security of them and felt comfortable straight away. And I remember going over there and scoring on my debut and the fans all singing my name, and it was, I absolutely loved it. Obviously, we was in our first incredible life experience. We were 3 young boys living in a different country, living in a hotel, no real responsibilities in quite a lively city. It was a real fun time for all of us, but obviously the football side of it was amazing, just to play first team football on a regular basis.
What was it like then returning to Manchester United after having that loan experience? And did you feel like you had made progress and started to evolve as a player?
Yeah, so I'd certainly done well in Antwerp. My performances at Antwerp were really good. I went out there for the second half of one season when we were in the Belgian second division, ended up winning the division. And then after that summer, I went back out there to begin the season in the Belgium top division and started that season. I was really enjoying it, playing great teams like Anderlecht, Club Brugge, playing really well. And then I got the news that I was to go back to Manchester, and I was absolutely gutted because I assumed I'd be going back to Manchester just to go back into the reserve team squad, not into the first team. So I thought, why can't I just stay out in Antwerp? But when I got back, I got thrown straight into, again, the Worthington Cup. In the first team, we were playing away at Watford and had a real good performance. And then ever since then, I was with the first team every day and in and around the squad and picking up appearances here and there.
At this time, your star is rising, your status is going up. I mean, everyone around the country is speaking about you as potentially the next big thing to come out of Manchester United. Do you think that makes you a bit more of a target for ladies, for people trying to get into the players, especially at such a young age? How did you handle everything, the fame and trappings that go along with that?
Yeah, to be honest, I was never really comfortable. I was never really in it for that, really. I was quite, I don't know, all I was interested in playing football. I would have been happy playing for anyone, but the fact that I was in the Man United first team squad, I couldn't believe it, to be honest with you. It was like being in part of a dream. I think a lot of the because I was quite naive in the fact that I probably didn't see that, like you mentioned there, that everyone was talking about me and everyone knew who I was. I never really realised that. I just come back from Antwerp and I was in the squad and I was playing. I think that when I found out that I was actually famous, people knew who I was. It was probably a negative thing in the terms of what I spoke about before, of being on the telly, people probably speaking about the way I looked more than the way I played football. I did find fame in general. I was quite happy in the background, but I didn't really like people talking about me positively and obviously not negatively. I'd rather just be not spoken about at all. So I did really struggle with that. And the fact that it was on such a large audience when it happened, and it weren't about football either, which made it even sort of harder to deal with. It was a strange experience. I didn't have a clue how to deal with, really.
I can empathise with that. I really can, because it's hard enough being comfortable with your looks and yourself and your own friends and family and surroundings. When that's magnified and amplified by national newspapers, by rival fans, it must have been a real difficult thing to deal with, because obviously you're not the first person to be ridiculed by rival fans by their looks. But when it's happening to you and you're a young man, a young player, again, I can only empathise. It must have been a real hard thing to deal with. Yeah,
it was more like although probably not right, but some things are said that shouldn't be said on a terrace. I always thought it was fair game in a football pitch. I was putting myself, that's what I wanted to do. I could deal with that. It was more the stuff off the pitch where I weren't putting myself in a position, I weren't asking for it. I found that hard to deal with. And because it was such a childish sort of schoolboy thing, I thought, why do I feel so bad about this being said? Is it me that's just being stupid about it? It was, and I was like I say, I was still quiet, shy. I didn't open up about my feelings. So I never mentioned it to anyone. So sort of just tried to brush everything under the carpet. If anyone asked me about it, I'd say, "Oh no, it's fine. I'm not bothered about it really." So I just generally didn't have a clue how to deal with it and didn't have the confidence to speak out and tell people that I'm struggling to deal with this situation.
I don't think you should have had, though. It's only now, with the emphasis placed on mental health, that things like this are being picked up. Like, if you look at it now, you were kind of bullied nationally by newspapers and TV hosts for literally nothing, for putting yourself out there and playing the game and doing the job that you liked. It's only now that with the attachment of the mental health that people are kind of aware and taking responsibility for their actions. But certainly wasn't right in any aspect what happened to you. I don't agree with it. I think it was totally wrong.
Yeah, and I think at the same time, that was probably the attitude. That was probably my attitude back then. Whether it was me or someone else, my attitude would have been pull yourself together, which is obviously completely wrong. But the way that sometimes mental health was perceived years ago, without a shadow of a doubt, things are in a better place. There's still loads of work to do to get it in a better place than it is now. But the awareness is raising and does need to be raised even more. Because like you say, I was in a position where I'm thinking, how can I feel bad? I want to be a footballer. I am a footballer. I'm playing for probably the best club in the world, but I feel terrible about what's happening at the moment.
Yeah. How did this impact your football? Because like we said, it's a different time to now, to the era back then. I'm guessing mental health as well would have been perceived as a weakness back in the old school sort of days. How did that whole thing and the whole incident have an impact and bearing on your footballing career at that time?
I don't think it had a massive impact in my career. I think it really soured a part of my life that should have been off the pitch. It should have been the most enjoyable, like playing for the biggest team in the world, winning the league, playing in a team. It should have been incredible, where it wasn't, for the fact that I wouldn't want to, all I want to do was get up from football and go home. I wouldn't want to go anywhere because I was so anxious about people laughing at me or people pointing at me, which probably wouldn't have happened, but that's how I felt because of the ridicule I was getting. In terms of on the pitch, I think that was the release. It was a time where I didn't have to worry about anything else because all I could focus on was my football. I think in terms of the reasoning why I didn't have an incredible football career at Manchester United, I think the main part of my game was when I broke through, I was incredibly fast. That was my standout ability, to be able to run past people with a ball and make runs and have that. I think during my second season, I had problems with my hips and my pelvis, which resulted in surgery, where I probably lost a little bit of that. And even losing a little bit of that, I didn't have enough else to carry on at that elite level. I couldn't drop off and get it off the fullback like Bex and then play a 70-yard through ball, or Giggsy was more intelligent at coming inside and about affect the game that way. I was more, every time I get it, I try and run with the ball. And when I didn't have that, I couldn't affect a game, or I couldn't affect training sessions with these world-class players like I probably could when I first come into the squad. And like Sir Alex Ferguson said that to me. He said, if you haven't got that super strength that you had, you're not going to have a career here, and it's going to be tough for you to have a career at the top level, which is obviously hard to hear, but I appreciate that honesty, and then went out and forged a career in professional football, not at the top level and not at a club like Manchester United, but the dream was always to be a footballer. So I don't have any complaints about that.
Mm. After them injuries and that surgery, was there a point where you thought to yourself, there was a realisation that you wasn't going to kick on at Manchester United?
Yeah, I think I knew from the time I weren't having any sort of effect with the training sessions. Like I mentioned, I weren't really looking like I could break into the team. And I think from the times that I went on loan and out to Reading, it was my time at the club was coming to an end, really. And it was just really, and I didn't have any bad feeling towards the club. I had a great time there, and I was really keen to get away and sort of find my own journey in the game.
How productive were the loan spells for you at Reading? again to get you a few more appearances under your belt and get you back in the mix?
Yeah, I think that was a period. Reading was great. Burnley's season on loan at Burnley was great. Again, it was just trying to find somewhere where I could start my career. I probably spent the next 4 or 5 years really changing the way or the style that I played. So it probably wasn't brilliant at all these clubs. Thoroughly enjoyed playing for them, but was just trying to find a way of being effective, of being a little bit more intelligent, knowing that I couldn't just run past people at the time, that I've got to learn a different way of coming inside, finding little pockets, playing more combination passes, and just looking to have like I say, just to have a career in the game.
This brings us to your move. This brings us to your move to West Ham. Who was the West Ham manager at the time you signed?
So Alan Pardew was in charge. He was the same manager that took me to Reading as well. So I had that previous relationship with him. When the news came, I think I was on tour with Man United in America when the gaffer told me that West Ham had come in and it was an opportunity to go. And I jumped at the chance, really. My wife had just had a child who was like 1 year old. We were keen to move back from Cambridge. Moving to West Ham gave me the opportunity to do that, and I was delighted to move to West Ham.
What was Sir Alex Ferguson's parting comment to you? Bearing in mind he had such high hopes of you as a youngster and development, it must have hurt him for you to be leaving the club. What was the last conversation?
I think it's the same with the manager. Was disappointed when more or less everyone leaved. Like, he wanted the best from everyone, but like, the whole organisation is incredible at Manchester United. The passing words that Sir Alex said to me were, "You've been part of this club now. If you ever need anything, get in contact, because we will do everything to help you." And that is what I expected, really, because he's a class man and it is an incredible football club.
Are you still in contact with anyone from the club? Did you make lifelong friends from your journey in Manchester?
That's something that I've made make close relationships with people, but something I'm really poor at is staying in contact. I think in football in general, it's sometimes like ships in the night. 1 minute you're at one club, 1 minute at another, and you sort of leave them relationships behind. Since I've stopped playing, I've done some work with MUTV and gone up to the games. And I think the beauty of football is I've bumped into people that I've not seen for 15 odd years, but the connection's still there that you've built in football and being teammates. I've bumped into ex-teammates and immediately it's like you've never been away. So that's been real nice to do that and see players that I played with years ago.
Before we move off the subject of Manchester United, I'd just like to ask a few more questions about Sir Alex, really. Must have been a huge honour for you to spend that time with him and stuff. Is there any decisions that you questioned yourself at the time that Sir Alex had made, which then later turned out to be correct?
I don't think so. I can't say. I think that like everyone, the respect I had for him was incredible. At the same time, there was that little bit of fear as well, a little bit of fear that you wouldn't do enough. And I think that really took away from you. I personally, even if I saw him now, there'd still be that little bit of trepidation, like the utmost respect. And I'd never, even now, wouldn't question any decisions he's made, because I think you look at the success he's had and how can you really question that, because the man really is a genius in the football world.
There was a network of spies in Manchester that worked for Sir Alex, telling him what players were out and what players had been to certain night spots and clubs. Did you feel when you was in Manchester that people were sort of taking notice of what you were doing and you could feel the eyes of Sir Alex even though he wasn't there?
Yeah, I think probably more importantly was what was drummed into you at such a young age of what it meant to play for the football club. And I sort of took them lessons on board. So I certainly, as much as possible, wouldn't misbehave or get into situations I shouldn't have. Because obviously if you're representing the club, you don't want to let it down. You don't want to let him down. So I think being a Man United player, there's always eyes on you, regardless of whether it's one of Sir Alex's spies or whoever. You've got to represent that club at as best you can at all times.
Well, now we spoke about the anxiety that was caused from, in my opinion, bullying. No other word for it. Do you think this would magnify the fact that the players that had gone before you, in particular in your position, were like global pin-ups? So you've got like David Beckham. Then before him, you had Ryan Giggs, who was like the ultimate sort of early to mid 90s pin-up. Do you think that in a way sort of put more pressure on yourself? Like nothing to do with you and unintentional, but just a weird set of circumstances that conspired.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I've never really thought about it like that. Obviously, you speak about Becks and Giggs. It is hard boots to follow in every aspect, really. It'd be interesting to see if time was completely different and I was a big, horrible centre half or something, whether I still would have received the same abuse that I did. But it is a hard question to answer. I've never really thought about it like that. And obviously, that may have had a small effect on it. I really couldn't tell you on that one.
Okay. Let's go straight into West Ham then. You're a big player at West Ham. You've been brought in to play games. The manager's got faith in you, having worked with you before. How did everything sort of start off for you at West Ham?
Yeah, I was buzzing to sign, like I said, and didn't come in to sign quite late in pre-season. I think I was on the bench in the first game away at Leicester, and then I come on and set the winner up for Teddy against Reading in the first home game of the season. Was doing really well in training, sort of found myself in the team, and it was, I'd sort of describe my season as in and out. I started off quite bright, then probably faded away a little bit, signed a new contract, then had a few niggly injuries. So it was a time where I was trying to change the style of having different ways of being effective in the game. I'd had some good games, had some really poor games, had some average games. It was, I'd say, an inconsistent season, but a real honour to have represented another fantastic football club and to experience games at Upton Park. You don't get many atmospheres like that. Excuse me. There was times where things weren't going great that season. We had a fantastic squad of players for a championship team that probably should have won that league. We ended up just sneaking in the playoffs before winning them. So there was some real pressure times. The gaffer was under huge pressure from the fans. The fans were disenchanted with the team at times. It was a tough place to play, sometimes out on the wing at Upton Park when the game weren't going particularly well for us. But an honour to have been part of that club because it is another special football club.
Did you get a chance to experience the West Ham-Millwall rivalry as a player?
Yeah, so I remember playing at the Den against Millwall. I had quite a good game, actually. I remember getting into a bit of a fracas with Dennis Wise, who was playing for Millwall at the time. And he really he gave me a little slap on the back of the head, but it was real incredible atmosphere. I remember at Upton Park, though, it did get went a bit too far. I remember we couldn't leave the car park for about 2 hours after the game, so I think there was a bit of trouble outside. But that is certainly a fierce, not much love lost between them two clubs, that's for sure.
What goes through your mind as a player when fans of your team are notorious, when you know there's going to be tear-ups, like for the West Ham Millwall game? What do you think as a player? Like, what goes through your mind?
To be honest with you, I was always just focused on the football. I never really thought about what could be happening off the pitch. I'm not sure. I probably wouldn't have my missus and kids come to the Millwall game. I'd think about it in that respect, but not once you're on the pitch. It was all about the football, not really what's going on outside it. I'm like, obviously both clubs have got reputations for that sort of thing. I don't think it's anywhere near as bad as it used to be, and thankfully that sort of thing is dying out the game as much as possible.
You guys managed to get through to the Premier League, to the playoffs, winning a spot in the Premier League. Must have been a huge buzz for yourself at that time. Can you talk me through that period?
Yeah, to be honest with you, it was incredible. The club had got promoted. I didn't really appear in the playoffs. I didn't appear in the final, but was there supporting the lads, and obviously absolutely delighted for the club to get back promoted. I think when you're not part of it, it's it feels different when you're sort of celebrating. I remember thinking it's an opportunity now back in the Premier League to see what I can do come next season. So it was a huge buzz in that respect. It was great that we got, because it did mean so much to the club that they had to really get back up after losing in the playoffs a year before as well. And I come back for pre-season, sort of raring to go, done really well in the pre-season games, and then got quite shocked really when got a call to say that I'd be going out on loan to Stoke, because unfortunately for me, but great for West Ham, they signed Yossi Benayoun, who played my position, and unfortunately for me, he was much better in that position than I was. So he was an absolute fantastic player, and I was told that with him there, obviously my chances would become few and far between. So again, it was a wrench to leave, because obviously I was living at home. West Ham was a great club, but it was always about the football for me, and I wanted to be playing games.
This takes us to Stoke City. Was Tony Pulis in charge of Stoke when you signed?
So when I signed, in charge was Johan Boskamp, who was a Dutch manager, and he actually knew me from my time when I was on loan on Antwerp when he was managing in Belgium. So I really enjoyed. He gave me sort of license and freedom to play, and he was the manager. Then he was let go, and then Tony came back in to take over.
We've heard some mixed reviews on Johan. What did you make of him and his tactics and his coaching methods?
I loved the way he played, because it gave me, a lot of the team was built around me, and I was given the freedom to really express myself. He was quite, what's the word to use? He was larger than life character, a real fun guy. He was wanted to play attractive football, probably never really brought in a lot of foreign players at the time in the Championship who probably weren't used to the style of football in the Championship or the physical nature of it, and probably didn't perform as well as he hoped, and it never really worked out for him. I was a great guy. I had a lot of time for him. I had a lot of fun playing for him.
When Tony Pulis came in, how does that sit with you? I mean, under Johan, you're the main man. You're taking corners, set pieces, free kicks and throw-ins. How did that sit when Tony came in, and how did that affect you as a player?
To be honest with you, I was, in terms of the people that have coached and managed me, I've always sort of had an opinion by them of how they treated you as a person rather than the football knowledge or anything. And Tony Pulis is one of the best people, the best player manager people I've ever met in my life. He was an incredible man who always was just as interested in you as a person as you as a footballer. When he came in, it meant my job changed quite a lot, whereas I went from being quite free-spirited to being quite a structured shape and having to do a lot more running than I wanted to do. But because it was for him, I'd want to do it. I'd sort of want to work as I had, similar to Sir Alex in that respect, is he made you want to work as hard as you can for him. So I wasn't that free-flowing player that could do what he wanted anymore. I was a wide right player that was in a structured system that had to do his job in all aspects, or I wouldn't play. But at the same time, that's what the manager wanted, so that's what I'd try and do to the best of my ability.
What was the highlights for you from your time at Stoke?
I really enjoyed playing for Stoke. The fans were always great with me. The staff always looked after me. I think where I struggled was my family didn't really settle up there, so they moved back home, and I was doing so much travelling to and from Cambridge to Stoke that I never was probably 100% physically right or mentally right with the amount of travelling I was doing. But other than that, my whole experience at Stoke was a real enjoyable one. Great set of lads, great fans, and Johan was great, and Tony was, like I say, an incredible man.
This takes us out you for a little loan spell at Norwich City before joining the club permanently. Can you talk me through that period of your life?
Yeah, so Norwich came in for me that summer just as Tony took over at Stoke. And I went to see Tony and explain my situation in terms of my family aren't settled. I really want to take this move. And he's told me in no uncertain terms that I weren't going anywhere. He said that he needed me at the club. He said, let's revisit it. You said, you work your socks off for me and I'll do everything I can to help you. But let's see how this season starts. So we went through that process and got to the transfer window, and it was agreed that it weren't really workable what I was doing. So with his blessing, and I can't thank him enough for allowing me to go to Norwich. I signed for Norwich under Peter Grant, who was Alan Pardew's assistant at West Ham, that had the Norwich job. And again, similar to the West Ham move, I was absolutely buzzing to move to Norwich because I was going back home again. I was going to travel to Norwich. Started training in a real good place, had a debut on the Sunday. We were playing Ipswich away in the big East Anglian derby game. Started the game, scored a goal, fans singing my name, absolutely delighted, thinking this is it, this is a dream move, it's all going to work out perfectly. And then towards the end of the game, getting barged off the pitch. And I remember lying on the floor trying to get my breath back because I was winded. And I got my breath back. I realised my shoulder had popped out that I had a problem with, and I sort of got that back in. And Adam Jury said, don't look down. So immediately I looked down, and my knee had a gaping hole in it where I'd gone into the microphone or something, the TV microphone. I could see the bone sticking out, and I was in a real bad place. And I remember getting stretchered off, sat in the medical room at Ipswich. The physio was frantically trying to stitch the wound up because they were worried about infection, but it was too wide and he couldn't do it. And I remember I was in so much pain. I just broke down crying. I didn't know what was going on. I was in absolute agony, and it was that really summed up the move to Norwich in the end, in my respect. Really, it was a fantastic club that looked after me so well while I was injured, but after that, just never got going there whatsoever, really, which was a real shame because I was so happy to go to such a great club and being so good for me where it was located near my house as well.
What happened with the road to rehabilitation then? Did you feel after that injury you just couldn't force your way back into the team?
It was the worst injury I'd ever had because I went straight to hospital, and I'd stay hospital a couple of nights because they were so worried about infection. But I left hospital thinking there weren't that much of a problem. It'd be 4-6 weeks, I'll be back playing. It ended up from 4-6 weeks turning into 8-9 months where the swelling just never went down. And it was horrible because if you get a real serious injury, like a cruciate and whatnot, you've got that road to recovery. Here, there was no explanation really. Just swelling wouldn't go down, so they couldn't clear me to go back playing, obviously, with a hugely swollen knee. So it was just never knowing of when I was going to be fit. And then when I eventually did get fit, I suffered a thigh strain, like a little niggly one. Then the manager left, Glenn Roeder come in, never really got going again. And it just got to the point where I thought, I just need a fresh start. It's so much water's gone under the bridge at Norwich. I'm still not fit. I've been here 18 months and I just need a new challenge. So nothing against Norwich City, who are a brilliant football club, but then the move come about to go to MK Dons, which I jumped at the opportunity really to go and get some first team football.
Talk to me about signing for MK Dons. Talk to me about everything behind the move, because you're coming back off a serious injury, very serious injury. Glenn Roeder coming in, as you mentioned, new manager, so he's going to want to bring in his own players and have his plans. Does that make the move to MK Dons that much more important for you, the fact that it needs to work?
Yeah, I don't know if I thought about it. Like I was delighted to go to MK Dons. We had a cup game against them for Norwich. I remember being in the stadium thinking, flipping heck, it's sort of, this ain't right for a League One club. It's an incredible place. So I actually spoke to my agent and said, Milton Keynes, again, a good journey from where I live, which gets more important as you get older. I've got my children are starting to go to school. Can you speak to MK Dons? And fortunately, they were interested in speaking, went there on loan, and it was brilliant. The whole move was brilliant for me. It was a beautiful stadium for my wife and children to come and watch me play. They were always treated so well. Great bunch of lads, great managers that I worked for there, and the chairman was an incredible man that just wanted things to be right, really. So I thoroughly enjoyed my whole experience at MK Dons.
It seemed that you kind of found the home you were looking for in MK Dons. The familiarity, the regularity of playing, the staying free of injury, which again, suiting your way of thinking as well, not too far from Cambridge, ticks a lot of boxes for you. And it seemed you really flourished in that environment.
Yeah, I think I just felt settled there immediately, really. Obviously, it was the league below the Championship, League One, where I was probably one of the better players in that league, and that gave me confidence. I started every game. I was playing in a position that probably suited me better from coming to a more central area. So everything about the move worked out really well, and it was without a doubt the most consistent period of my footballing career.
It strikes me as a strange one. The whole time you've been playing football, has your family just literally stayed in Cambridge? So you haven't like relocated your wife or your kids anywhere? You've just based them in the same place?
Yeah, that was always the plan. We did have a brief spell where we moved up to Stoke together, but it never really worked. And I'm lucky in the fact that where I live in a beautiful part of the country, like a little village in the south of Cambridge, which is a lovely place for my kids to be brought up. I'm sort of a bit of a worrier, so bringing them up in an area I didn't know might have worried me a little bit. But this is ideal, really, and I'm pleased that I've done it. To be honest with you, I'm pleased that they have been brought up in such a nice area that we're all so familiar with.
In the most Luke Chadwick type decision so far, you then joined Cambridge United. It's been a long road coming. You finally can live indoors and not travel anywhere. Talk to me about that process.
Yeah, that's probably the thing in my career that I'm most proud of, really. As we spoke about right at the beginning, as that 6-year-old boy that went to the Abbey Stadium for his first live game of football and fell in love with it after that. It was always my fantasy. As a kid, every time I'm going to bed at night, I used to dream about scoring a goal for Cambridge United. Even after I'd signed schoolboy forms for Man United, the dream would always be to score that goal. So to live out my dream and go and play for that club that made me want to be a professional footballer, and I went and approached them and explained to them my dream. I spoke to MK Dons and said, look, my legs ain't going to last forever. Can I still go and do this where I can still run around a little bit and give it a little go? So it is something I'm hugely proud of, and something that I sort of lived my football career. I want to do the best for the group. I put individual award or to a side for the team to do well, but this is certainly something that I've done purely for myself to live out my little dream for a few months.
It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. The way you explained it and the way I'm thinking about it, it makes more sense. It's just so organic. The fact to go back and why you've still got the legs to give something for Cambridge was a fantastic thing for you to do.
Yeah, like I say, it is something. I don't say I'm proud of myself for many things, but this is something that I'm certainly really proud of. And obviously I got to go to Wembley and went back to Old Trafford. The best moment was scoring a goal at the Newmarket Road end where I used to stand when I was a teenager and just sort of, I've said this a few times, people don't believe me, but I've never ever felt like that on a football pitch before. The hairs on the back of my neck were generally stood up when I kicked the ball and it went in the goal. And I remember like cuddling the lads and celebrating. Then I was walking back to the centre circle for the opposition to kick off, and I generally thought, like, I'm welling up here. I'm going to start crying. A 34-year-old man and just scored a goal. And that is genuinely how it felt. It was an incredible feeling, incredible.
I know you're a real humble guy, and having that Manchester United sort of early stages in your career probably added to that. But is there a huge part of you that just wants to walk around and celebrate at that point because you've lived out your dream, then to come back and play for your boyhood club, the town that you grew up in, and like you said, score goals? It's a beautiful, beautiful thing.
Yeah, like you say, I speak about being humble, but I think at times possibly I am a little bit too humble. I get a little bit awkward or really awkward about sort of blowing my own trumpet and saying I fulfilled that sort of thing. I feel awkward doing it, which is probably a slant on me, really, in a way. I should be more confident to do that, but I'm never really one to shout from the rooftops. But at the same time, I don't think that really matters because I've got that sort of inside for the rest of my life. I know that I've fulfilled my lifetime's ambition really with that. So it's something that I can certainly be proud of and enjoy by myself without sort of shouting about it from the rooftops.
Talk to me about the decision to call time on your playing career. Something that you've done for the whole of your adult life and the majority of your young childhood as well. Talk to me about that decision to call time.
Yeah, so like a lot of players would probably say this, that I didn't make that decision myself. It was sort of, I was struggling a bit through injury. I had to have a hip operation in my last year at Cambridge, and I was always conscious that I never wanted to take money off them if I couldn't do my job to the ability that I was making a difference, really. So they called me and said there weren't going to be a contract offer for me, which shouldn't have been surprising, but at the same time it was like a dagger to the heart. It hurt so much to hear that news, and then a few options came up, but it would have meant again a lot of travelling, which I didn't really want to do. So I was sort of in limbo. What do I do? And then within a few months, the phone stops ringing a little bit, and then you start to realise that perhaps it is all over now. So it's certainly was probably one of the toughest, or if not the toughest period of my life, accepting that football's over now. They've got to find something else to do. And like you say, it's been your life since the age of 8-9 years old, and now it's gone as in it is. Your professional career is just over, just with a 1-2 minute phone call, really.
I find this quite interesting because footballers have had a massive status. You've worked hard, rightly so, to get into a position where you're well rewarded for your work. To then leave football and having to start something from scratch, to be at the bottom of something or to learn something new, must be a real daunting thing for a 35, 36-year-old man who's had huge earning capacity, huge status. How did you handle that? How did you deal with that?
Yeah, again, not very well at all, I don't think. I sort of, like you say there, you see people struggle when they come to their end of their career, but my attitude was, that's not me, I'll be all right. I used to joke around with my missus and kids saying, all I'm going to do when my career ends, I'm going to be like Jim Royal off the Royal Family. I'm going to sit in my chair, drink cans of lager all day and watch the telly. But when that turns into reality, you realise that it's not the life you want to lead. So it was a real tough period. Again, probably going back to that stuff at Man United where I didn't speak about it. Again, I kept things bottled up inside and just thought, what's wrong with me? I'm not playing football anymore, but I'm still here. What's up with me? And again, it took me probably opening up and actually being honest and saying, look, I'm struggling here. I don't know what to do. Where do I fit in the world now? I've been a footballer all that time, and now I don't know what I'm going to do. I sort of went down the coaching route, done my coaching qualifications. That kept me busy. Then got a job in the academy at Cambridge United, which I thought would make me happy, but I didn't really enjoy it. When I was playing, I was, as I've said a few times, quite a quiet guy. I weren't really into shouting and bawling. I weren't into coaching that much. I weren't desperate to be one, but I'd got a job and felt like I should be grateful for it and just sort of plodding along. But I think to really become at ease with myself and happy again, it's took me to step out of professional football completely. And I think now I've done that, I feel so much more open to new challenges and doing different things.
Talk to me about where you're at now in life. How are you passing your time creatively? What is going on with Luke Chadwick at the present time?
So I'm now part of organisation called the Football Fun Factory that's a real rewarding organisation that we've set up. It is all around, as the name suggests, fun football experiences for children. So it couldn't be further away from that professional element. It is purely kids of all ages, abilities from 2 to 12 coming along to our sessions, and hopefully, if we're doing our jobs correctly, leaving with a smile on their face. And we're not developing professional footballers, but we are trying to develop that lifelong love for this beautiful game and using football as a vehicle to promote positive life skills. So we'll reward great communication, great sportsmanship, great teamwork, probably more than we will the little lad who's just scored 15 goals in the session, because it is all inclusive and we want people to be rewarded for fantastic attitude just as much as fantastic football skills.
If you could change one decision you made during your footballing career, it could be anything from any time or any period, with the benefit of hindsight, what would you change?
I think that what I would change would be that I wouldn't have stopped trying with my education. I would have educated myself as much as possible, taken my school years just as importantly as my football. So I would have come away with school with a real good backup plan. And then football is such a short career. It feels like only yesterday I was driving up to Manchester as that 16-year-old, and in a blink of an eye, it's gone. But I'm still a young man who's got his whole life ahead of him in terms of another period of my life now to do other things. So although I'm enjoying doing that, I think I would have been in a better position if I would have educated myself more before, during and after my career.
Did you have an arch enemy on the football pitch, a nemesis, someone that you either relished or didn't relish playing against regularly?
Never. To be honest with you, I think I sometimes get described as probably too nice. There's no one I'd ever have a problem with or anything like that. I was quite laid back in that respect. I used to enjoy playing against everyone. Probably as a younger player, I'd enjoy playing against the worst teams more than the good ones, because I just love scoring as many goals as I could, really. But I wouldn't say there was anyone I ever had a running battle with or didn't enjoy playing against.
I would have said that your personality and character would have been probably the dream personality for a young footballer of you as a manager to have. How did you feel at the time when players of the opposite personality, players that would be out all the time, players that maybe didn't listen to the manager, how would you personally feel inside or react to that?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, because obviously I'm probably a little bit different from a lot of the personalities that play football, in terms I'm probably a bit more quiet, not as sort of driven to do that sort of thing. I'm always a great believer in everyone's got their own journey and needs to be their self. Like, it'd be boring if everyone was like me or if everyone was like you. It takes all different sorts of personalities, and I'm a great believer in difference, and I enjoy socialising with people that might be similar to me but are the polar opposite as well. So I've got no real problem in people living their lives. It's hard to see if someone's in your team and they're doing things that could potentially make your team be worse on a Saturday afternoon, but I've not seen that much. And obviously professional football, as times moved on, professionalism is a huge part of the game, and it's taken very seriously from the majority of players. I did notice it a little bit more when I took a step into semi-pro football, and I played for my mate at Soham Town Rangers, and we had a game on New Year's Day, and I was a good boy and stayed in. And then when I got in the dressing room the next day, half the dressing room stunk of alcohol. So I think that had a good night out. But different horses for different courses. I embrace difference.
The Premier League is in a changing period at the moment. It seems to be kind of changing of the guard. We've seen Liverpool win their first title in 30 years. Manchester United hovering sort of mid-table, which is very strange to see, to say the least. Do you feel that Manchester United will be the powerhouse they've been in the past decades? in coming up in recent time again?
I'd like to think so. I think I got a little bit carried away since football come back and watching the first 3-4 games. I thought United were electric. Like, they looked like, for me, the best team in the league since we've come back. Obviously, Liverpool have won the league. They're far and away the best team. You can see that by the points. City got some fantastic players, but United seem to have gone up another level. The Matic, Pogba, Bruno, the midfield three, the pace and power of Martial, Greenwood, Rashford. I think that looks like a team that could compete. And then seen the last 3 games, and it seems like they've taken a step back. I was lucky enough to be at Wembley yesterday, and they were so far off it. It was scary, really. Chelsea looked stronger in all departments. So it's going to be tough. Liverpool and Man City are the benchmark at the minute. Chelsea and United seem a little bit behind that, but I'd like to think a couple of signings, United could be up there challenging. But what I've seen the last 3 performances, I think they do look a long way behind what City and Liverpool have got.
When you think of all your teammates from your Manchester United days, the big characters you had in and out of the changing rooms, the natural leaders you had, the pure aggression and talent that was in that changing room, did you have any inkling that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer would be the one out of all those players to then be the manager?
No, I don't think so. I think you looked at him as a player, but the one thing that stands out is he's huge. Like, all these lads out there, all these top players, but the dedication to his craft. If he was something said that he had to be better at, I think he got to a stage at United where he probably weren't as strong enough, and he was in the gym every day working his socks off, and he got into a state where he was one of the strongest strikers. He'd practice his finishing all the time, that dedication to his craft. And whereas I think back then you look at the likes of Roy Keane, Gary Neville, and say they're probably the 2 that you'd think would go on and become the managers. But saying that, the game has changed a lot, and it does take that more looking after individual needs and them softer skills that may be required, that maybe Ollie's got in abundance in terms of getting the best out of each individual. And I think the lessons that he's learned, and he talks about it a lot, from taking what Sir Alex done on board and trying to build something similar now. And it does seem like the club's in the best place it's been in since the manager left. I think Ollie offers so much more in terms of building that similar sort of environment than David Moyes, Louis van Gaal or Jose Mourinho got to. I think he's closer to it now than we've been, but it's going to still need a lot more work.
Most fans of other Premier League teams will dislike Gary Neville. Don't know what reason it is. You've probably never met him, had a conversation with him, but just from the way he is and his pro-Manchester United demeanour, his attitude, he's always trying to get the best out of people. He can just annoy people. I don't know what it is. What was he like as a teammate? Did he ever grate on you a little bit?
Not at all. I feel one word that I think that described Gary from that sort of squadron I was around is busy. He'd love organising everything. He was priceless for that dressing room, because he'd do the things that other people wouldn't do and do stuff to bring the team together. And he was incredibly enthusiastic about everything, always out on the training field, very rarely injured, and he was a huge part of that dressing room. I'd say what you said about other people not liking him if they didn't support Man United, I think that has changed a lot since he's now shown his real personality on Sky Sports. I think he's quite popular now in what he does at Sky Sports, and probably won a lot of people over. He's quite honest about the fact that he's a huge Manchester United fan, but he reports on the game, and he is incredibly honest in his feedback that he gives, and he's done a fantastic job on the TV, and I thoroughly enjoy watching him myself.
Watching the 92 class of 92 documentary with my son, I just found it quite funny. The dynamic of the group, and like you said, Gary Neville always taking it upon himself to be like a stepfather to everyone. Just found that quite hilarious.
Yeah, there is obviously great dynamic within that group. They've been brought up together from such a young age. Scholesy and David Beckham were always quite quiet. Giggsy and Nicky Butt were always the jokers, but they had such an incredible bond between them, as well as the bond of the whole dressing room as well. It was obviously, you watch them sort of documentaries, you see the stories, and to have shared a dressing room with these people was amazing, absolutely amazing.
Will we ever see you involved in the game again, whether that be in a coaching, scouting, or dare I say, managing capacity?
To be honest, I'd never be a manager. I was something or a coach. I'm not. I was quite interested in. I'm interested in the younger players, but once you get up to first team level, it's just not for me. I remember what it must have been like for the coaches to coach me sometimes, and it's not something I fancy getting involved in. I do like keep my hand in the game and sort of offer advice to players that want to speak to me and that sort of thing. But I don't really, I don't see myself. I feel so much more happy and content in my life away from coaching in professional football that I don't think I'll get back to it anytime soon.
I've got to say, it's been a great pleasure chatting about your career today and your life and everything. I didn't realise just how important Cambridge was to you for today.
No, yeah, I've got in the other room, there's like a mural. I don't know if you've ever seen that Alan Partridge episode where he's got pictures of him up in the wall. I've actually got a Cambridge United badge up in my living room. I try and keep it away from most people because I look like an absolute weirdo when people see it. But I am a huge, huge fan of the club. Both my kids are there. My eldest son, he's 17. He's actually a goalkeeper. He's doing his scholarship there. And my youngest, he'll go back as an under 15, and he's a centre half. So God knows where these two got that from. But they're enjoying it, which is the main thing.
It's mad, isn't it? You think like you was like a talented winger, all the pace in the world, and your offspring end up a goalkeeper and a centre half.
Yeah, it's mad.
It's mental. Yeah, I've got to say, it's been a great pleasure going over your career today. I really, really do appreciate it. And I've got to say thank you ever so much for being so hospitable via the Zoom and humouring me. Great.
No worries. Enjoyed talking to you, James. It's been a pleasure.
Really appreciate it. Hopefully we'll get a chance to catch up soon when things get back to a bit more normality.
Yeah, hopefully not long now. We'll be back to normal.
Top man. I thank you very much for your time today, Luke. It's been a great pleasure.
Cheers, James. Take care.